animal nutrition and applied animal nutrition and feeding is usually thought of as sort of a microscience. We feed a cow, or we look at even a tissue, what are the nutrients the tissue needs? But then there's also an aggregation of that to a farm and to the environment, to the whole country. There's effects that animal nutrition has on the environment, it has on the economy, it has on trade.
Welcome to the Feed Science Podcast, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Carlos Campabanal from Kansas State University, dedicated to bringing you the latest insights and discussions from the feed science industry. Please get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead with today's episode. So today, with great pleasure, I have Dr. Rick Kohn, who is a professor in animal science here at the University of Maryland. Rick, welcome to the podcast. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So as we start a little bit, so the audience can learn a little bit about yourself and your work, can you please just tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the position you have there at University of Maryland?
Yes, well, I actually grew up on a small farm. I went to college at Cornell University and then University of New Hampshire. Got my PhD at Michigan State. My interests have been in dairy cattle nutrition. I worked on some diet formulation approaches for some time, including the cornel net carbohydrate system, the NRC, and some evaluation and so forth. And I teach Animal Science 315, which is applied animal nutrition at the University of Maryland.
Great. Perfect. So your work traditionally has been done mainly into the dairy cattle. Have you done also beef cattle nutrition or maybe other species? I'm assuming more into the ruminant world.
Yeah, I'm more with dairy, but yes, I have done some projects with beef cattle nutrition, including grazing beef, grass-finished beef. And I've had some little experience with nutrient management in other species, like nutrient management related to the nutrition. And poultry, we looked a little bit with aquaculture as well.
Oh, great. And I know University of Maryland has done a lot of poultry work there that I have read throughout some time there. And this is great. Of course, aquaculture, it's a very growing area, especially, that I see there in my line of work. So this is great. And so as we learn a little bit about what you do there in your research, can you tell us a little bit more about what are the type of works? I know that you have a couple of research focus there. Let's start a little bit, if you could tell us about your overall work in mathematical modeling that I know is a little bit more complicated and I will say maybe different compared to the typical animal science point that a lot of people do research on. So if you could kind of maybe expand on that would be great.
Yes, well, I'm one of those people that actually likes math and likes solving math problems, and I think it's a very useful tool. And animal nutrition, of course, not nearly as much as genetics, but there's quite a bit of math in the applied aspect of animal nutrition. It's a lot of, it can be algebra, basically compartmental analysis, a little bit of calculus, but it's not real difficult math from the math side of things, but it's very useful, and it becomes more difficult in the application, I guess, or more challenging or more interesting. So I've modeled basically at different systems. I've done some modeling of the rumen for cattle and looked at applying some laws of thermodynamics, kinetics to develop models of the rumen. I've also modeled for diet formulation beyond that, the whole animal, and looking at performance of models for diet formulation. We've looked at mechanistic models like Molly from California. And we looked at whole system models, whole farm models, environmental models. What are the impacts, for example, of how you formulate a diet on nutrient losses from the farm? So basically lots of different levels of aggregation, as you could say, of modeling nutrition and nutrient utilization on farms.
And I'm assuming also that besides that, when you mentioned some nutrient loss on the farm, I'm assuming also link a little bit more with the environmental impacts overall, especially in the dairy, that up to a point.
Yes, exactly. We showed now many years ago how important it is for accurate diet formulation, for example, to decrease nitrogen intake, decreasing protein needs. That also decreases nitrogen in the feces. That decreases the amount of nitrogen in the manure that has to be applied and the losses from the field once that manure is applied and so forth. So, for example, just a reduction, an improvement of, say, reducing nitrogen in the feed by 50% can get you about a 45% reduction in nitrogen loss from the farm into the water system. So it's very effective.
So something very important from that environmental perspective and overall, especially now these days on always on the herds and all the different tendencies that we have. So and for our audience, please like us there on with this podcast today. We really appreciate that. So as we move along a little bit there, very important all the work you have done in mathematical modeling. Of course, that brings a lot of programming. I'm sure. And now these days, the big thing going on in many areas, artificial intelligence. So I know that you have a lot of interest and work on that. Let's talk a little bit about that, your opinion on that, and how that can reshape everything related to animal nutrition and, of course, the area of feeding overall.
That's interesting because I actually asked ChatGPT what I thought of that, what it would say I thought, and it was a bit more optimistic than I am. But I think it's a tool, and it's unavoidable as a tool. As any tool, it's going to have its downsides. And I think one of the downsides is I started looking at it with teaching, because one of the things I have to do when teaching animal nutrition is to convince students that they should actually learn something about it. And not all of them agree. And especially if they I can just ask my phone that question, why should I memorize all this information or learn how to do all these things? And I think the reason you have to is that, it's actually even more difficult. I allow the students to use AI or, these large language models to do assignments. But if the large language model gives you an incorrect answer, that's on you. It's not on them. You have to be able to tell when that answer is right or not. And that's where your knowledge comes in. And that's actually harder because they can say things in a very nice, sweet way that sound legitimate, and they're not actually. So I think the question was about how are we going to use this in the future? We're just getting started. This technology, it's just getting started. One thing that's clear is some large companies are willing to spend a lot of money and building on this infrastructure. So it's going to be very different down the road than it currently is. I would not tell someone to ask ChatGPT to formulate a ration for a dairy cow at this point in time. But it is going to change. It's going to be able to handle a lot more data. It's going to be more automatic at putting in data. So, for example, if you're looking for a least cost feed or a least cost diet formulation for your geographic area that matches the farm that you're on, it should be able to enter all of that data and tell you, these are the feeds you should get. Now, remember, this is commercial. It's going to be commercial. So the people who control they're going to get some profit from it. So as I was saying, they're going to, they're guaranteed they're spending a lot of money. And another guarantee I'll make is that they're going to try to make money to make that money back. And that means, if I'm asking where I should buy a certain product to put in that ration, a certain feed, it might be influenced by the relationship the company that sells that feed has with the person who owns the technology making that decision. So those are things you're going to have to worry about. But in terms of what it can do in the future, if we're looking at a lot of data, currently we formulate diets for all of the species based on research that's been done in universities and companies over many years, from the 1960s to the present. Where we test these products, we determine digestibility, and we determine how much they'll eat, intake, all these factors, and then we decide how much to put in. And in the future, we can add to that research by also looking at, well, what happens on the average farm, once it's fed, when they're getting all the data that they're accumulating for you, even if it's data you're putting in or having put into the system, it's not going to ignore that data when it comes to trying to figure out if it works or not. So we start to put in a lot of farm data from a lot of different places. We have something that maybe resemble epidemiology more than nutrition, but to say that you're starting to see certain effects with this certain product, and that's another way to test those products.
No, and this is a very interesting topic, and of course, there for our audience. If you have any questions, please put it in the comment section, and we'll be sure to get into Dr. Kohn there. But going back to the conversation, first I have brought also information there in ChatGPT, and then it was an engineering calculation, and all the data tables that they gave me were like 2 decimals wrong. And I noticed that, but I didn't tell some people to see if they were just going to take it. But you're right, with your students, you have to be sure that they learn the concept to be able to tell if it's right or wrong. That at the end of the day, that critical thinking. So, but going back to the as we're starting to see this AI technology. You think there's going to come to a point that all these models will, for formulation and least cost formulation, depending on the ingredients that you could buy nearby or something around those lines, will that eventually come to a point that these models will be accurate enough to just be able to adapt on a constant basis on a specific farm or with focus on any species, not necessarily just dairy?
I think that I think they're going to be using the same models they're currently using, and they're going to try to tweak them a little bit for a given situation. That's the most I really would expect. I don't think you have to be super precise. The two decimal point. The milligram amount of things. There's a point where getting kind of close is good enough, and just know how close you need to be. So I think that, I don't think they're going to be successfully making huge changes, but I think they might be able to say that, well, when this certain ingredient is used, it's saving a couple of cents. So maybe this ingredient's maybe something about this ingredient's a little more digestible than we were thinking. If it's used in multiple places with multiple animals on multiple farms, and you start to see patterns, it might be able to start making some improvements in those models. And then on the other side of that, I think one of the things with the technologies, everything from radio and television and so forth, that has influenced extension and influenced our knowledge, there's always this trade-off that the ones providing the technology have an interest in sort of making money from providing you that technology. So they're getting information they get for free, like the information they get on the internet. And they're repackaging it to you to like precisely fit your question and your look, maybe improving it a little bit. And also they're taking the information you're putting in when you're using this technology to add to their database, right? And then they're using that to improve the model. And ultimately, they at least want you to think it's worth using their technology rather than go to the original source. So, that's kind of what's going to be happening. I think I may have gotten off target on the question, but
no, but this is very important because it brings several points. I mean, I have to say, I was actually for some information as an example, personal opinion, that ChatGPT, and I was looking for some information just to get it handy, and then it linked me the answers it gave me and said, "Hey, put some reference," and some of them were actually my own slide from PowerPoint. And then linked it to my Dropbox. So which was kind of, and I was just trying to verify information from that perspective. So
well, I did the exact same thing. And I actually, in some cases, used my things that I knew it should be referring to my own information. And one thing that I did now, it's many years ago, but developing the MUN analysis for dairy cattle to see if you analyze milk urea nitrogen, that you can tell anything about the ration and look for adjustments. So I asked for its recommendations, knowing that we were probably one of the first to make those recommendations back in like late 1990s. And it came back with something that looked almost like, I haven't checked it to the original, but it looked a lot like my original paper, but it didn't have any citations. So I said, well, provide some citations. And it provided several, like 10 references. 5 of them did not even exist. They were just made up, the journals or whatever. And the others were all new. And none of them referred to anybody, any of us. I wasn't the only one doing this work in those days, but none of them referred back to that original work, including the work that seemed like it just copied. And I can't think that it's doing that. So I had to think about why would it do that? And I think part of why it does that is that it wants to be the broker of the information. It doesn't want you to find the original information. It wants to provide it to you, and it wants you to then feel you should pay for something to get that information.
To get that information, yes.
From them, right? I mean, that's down the road. Right now, they're not making money, but I think they're trying to figure it out. And if it follows along Google and all of this other technology that came before it, I can remember, because I'm old, right? So I can remember things like when the internet was younger and news organizations started putting all their content online, and you just went and you could read any newspaper.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is cool.
I remember that too. Yeah.
There's like more information out there available to us and lots of different points of view. And now, I can pick up my phone, an iPhone, and I can get all the headlines. And then 2/3 of those, if I click on them, and it's just clickbait, it's, oh, this is a paywall. Oh, you have to apply for this service or so forth. So now they're making us pay for what was free, right?
Exactly.
And that, I think, is what ultimately they have to do in order to recoup all the money they're putting into the AI system. So I don't want to be entirely negative, because I think it's a technology. I think it's being developed because companies think it will be profitable. It's not like anybody's sitting in a room somewhere saying, you know what we really need? We need somebody to distill information, and everybody would want that. And we just want to provide that for free for society, since we've already made billions. Why don't we just do a favor, right? No, they're not. They're not doing that. They're looking for a way to make money on the information that's already available. That's a lot of what's happening now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it's at the end of the day, that's what I have noticed. I mean, on that sense, if I want to go, pay your subscription, and then we'll get you better making pictures and things like that. So
yeah, exactly.
Great. No, this is great information, especially I believe that for our younger generation, looking into it a little bit more, inclined, that's others, thinking that this will solve a lot of problems in the future. But I think we always have to go back to the basics of science and learn them to be able to get that critical thinking on that. So going back to that AI, do you think you mentioned several of those disadvantages in artificial intelligence, but for feeding purposes, what you could see that might be a downside besides the pay-in and maybe not getting accurate information from that sense? I mean, how can things can be limited, or I don't know, what do you could see on those risks?
Well, I think it could give you, right now it's providing some inaccurate information. And so we're hoping that it gets better. I know I gave a graduate level exam to ChatGPT a few years ago, and it got like a 20%. And then last year it got like a 70%, so it's getting better at certain kinds of questions. But I've also tested it at the dairy science meeting last summer. I gave an abstract where I tried different AI programs, and I asked it the same question over time, and I found that it was consistently getting wrong answers. And when I cornered it into a question where I said, calculate basically a ratio, it looked up the right information. Didn't get, when the ratio came out, it was related to how much environmental impacts of vegan diets. And it came up with a ratio, and it wanted to say that the environmental impact of a vegan diet was 1/20th as much as, the greenhouse gas. The greenhouse gas impact was 1/20th as much as a standard diet. And so I had it calculate from numbers. It looked up the right numbers. It told me what the numbers were, and then it fudged the calculation at the end, coming off with, so it's 20 times worse to eat an animal-based diet and get your animal protein. And so you can't do that. That's not a mistake. That's it wanted for some reason to get a certain conclusion, and it couldn't do math, simple math, and get to that conclusion. So it did the math wrong.
Yeah.
So and that's not going to change. There'll be biases. It'll be biased toward what the owner of that system wants us to think, or it'll be biased toward maybe mainstream media. But it's going to try to it tries to figure out what you think, and then it tries to tell you to basically what you think. And so
what you want to think,
what it thinks you want to hear, and that's how it's going. Those programs, they're competing with each other. The one that's going to get used the most is the one that tells the person who's using it what he wants to hear. Not necessarily the truth, but what he wants to hear.
I agree with that. And that's I see that as a risk. And of course, here for our audience, if you learned something new today, please share the video. We really appreciate that. Basic on all that. And I see that in animal nutrition and of course, feeding, maybe AI could tell you what you want to think, and there's mistakes and things that you have to learn and check. But I see probably the most things, and I don't want to get your opinion on this, on the environmental side of the animal production, because of course, been political topics and there's so many, it moves a lot of sentiment, those type of things. What do you think in terms of that, based on your work that you have done a lot in terms of animal production and the impacts that have done on the environment?
Yeah, so animal nutrition and applied animal nutrition and feeding is usually thought of as sort of a microscience. We feed a cow, or we look at even a tissue, what are the nutrients the tissue needs? But then there's also an aggregation of that to a farm and to the environment, to the whole country. There's effects that animal nutrition has on the environment, it has on the economy, it has on trade, all of these things. And so when we do these calculations, when we get to that very high level, it gets political, right? And then we have, people from different countries, having, all of these models that are currently used, not the AI models, but the models that we have, they're calculating things like greenhouse gases, and they're using different emission factors depending on the country you come from and so forth. There's a lot of politics involved in that. That's not science. I mean, you try to make it science. But if somebody is going to make money with an export or an import or what have you, there's just going to be reasons that people are going to want to try to massage the numbers, right? And I think it will do that too. It is mainstream media currently, and it's probably going to continue to have that element of danger, especially at that macro level of being mainstream media and wanting basically to convince us of the narrative that most benefits the ones who are controlling it.
Perfect. No, and of course, for our audience, please subscribe to our channel. Click on the bell to receive our notifications. So being said that, we know that the environment is a big political topic overall, but one of the things that I have noticed that, not trying to change gears whatsoever, but how everything fits in on your work, of course, environmental impacts, modeling, and I see that you have done a lot of work in terms of overall production of biofuels, next generation, more from overall different things coming out of the animal production farms, which I think is fantastic overall. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how AI can also be linked to that overall to kind of keep the line in terms of how the future looks?
Yeah, no, you mentioned the biofuels, and I think it's an area that's very interesting. And yes, I did work on some developing some techniques for some cellulosic ethanol and things like that. And it's highly related to, of course, animal agriculture and my work with the rumen fermentation, because that's the system that still today is the largest commercial system for using cellulosic energy, basically feeding cows grass collectively around the globe, converts a lot of grass to fuel and food. And so so we were using some of those same microorganisms and sometimes different ones, but we're looking at how we studied the rumen fermentation and applied that also to bioreactor for other bioreactor fermenters. And one of the things that I learned from that was the lesson that it is extremely political. So, you know, just because you have the best technology, if the government is paying somebody to produce something, they don't care how efficient it is. You've already got the grant to produce it. So we weren't able to get the industry to really adapt a lot of what we did. A lot of our work was to try to improve a process and make it more efficient, cheaper, better user of resources. And a lot of times companies were already getting a subsidy and they felt like, well, this wasn't going to affect the money that we're going to get. In fact, it could be worse because if we get more efficient, they'll have that higher expectation. And so, but I think that what I learned from that is that, yeah, it's complicated, it is political. There's a lot to this besides just, and there's a big reason why these processes haven't gotten a lot better. Well, I know you have an international office, international group of listeners, and I know a lot from Brazil, and I think in Brazil maybe that's not quite the case as it is in the U.S., but I think they have improved some of those techniques. But but there's it is but the issue about looking at how we use feedstocks or feeds. It's an integrated system. We're using it for human food. We're using the same grains. We're using them for human foods. We're using them for biofuels. We're using it for animal feeds. And what we're trying to really optimize is this system for all of these things. And yet our models currently, we're sort of separating them, and we're mostly focusing on the individual commodity like animals or, the animal feed. So into the future, we could look at these things in a more complex, more integrated way, where we're trying to optimize a larger system, a more integrated system.
And I see that, there's always I know we don't want to go away from the whole topic, but when you think about DDGs, key feed ingredient there coming from the ethanol production, but always the ethic, are we using our grain that we're still going to feed here, at least in the U.S. for the animals, produce ethanol, and the leftover going to that, and that's a different way from seeing it from other countries that they use more that, let's say, corn for food products,
But that's a very interesting question. It's the kind of thing that you can do models for, and it's the kind of thing that would be, sometimes science is hard for people, but sometimes the hard part is they don't really like the answer, politically or economically. It doesn't fit what you were wanting to get. And so then the science becomes more difficult.
It's time for our famous three.
Deep in the jungle, nature holds the secrets to healthier, happier chickens. Science is unlocking those secrets with Optient, the revolutionary lighting innovation for poultry farming. By mimicking nature, Optient gradient lighting creates a unique floor-level lighting gradient that improves feed conversion by up to 4 points, slashes energy use by 70%, and keeps flocks calm and stress-free. That means better animal welfare and a more efficient farm. Want to learn more? Optient gradient lighting is now available exclusively through your local Valco dealership or email optient@val-co.com today.
Very important, and I know we could do a lot of episodes in terms of this, all these topics here, but very good information, of course. And for our audience, please visit our site, wisenetties.com, and learn more about all of our podcast segments like the poultry, swine, dairy, beef, and of course, pet food overall. So, Dr. Kohn, we're coming to the end of our podcast. We have great information there. AI, big topic, mathematical models. We talk about environment, feeding, of course, and animal nutrition. But thinking about all this, I know it's hard, and yes, we're gonna say use AI, but what resources will you recommend? Some that wants to learn more about all these topics, and you could say a couple in terms of that for our audience, especially the international ones, so they could kind of learn more about your expertise in all these areas.
Yeah, I'm having, this is a new topic in terms of the AI. So I think reading up about just how technology works would be good. And I am really coming at a blank for a really good description of that. But I do recommend using some of these different, if you want the optimistic view, to carefully use some of these AI programs or large language programs and test them out. And test them out on things the answer to. Don't just, in particular, because I think that's what's going to show you if you're an animal nutritionist and you ask it to formulate a diet and you see that it's skipping a lot of steps and it's, it doesn't care about calcium or phosphorus, you're gonna see the weaknesses. But if you're asking it about something you know nothing about, the way most people are using it, you're going to get an answer and it's going to be just as wrong, but you're not going to know it. So you just be very careful with it.
No, this is great. I think this is great information. And then changing gears, we know you're there, University of Maryland, professor, teaches students, advise grad students in lab and all that type of field work. What do you recommend for your students, like a favorite book or resource that could help them throughout their career, and especially focus on how they could be successful overall on what they do?
Well, yeah, I think my thought is I think it's really important for people to learn critical thinking, and also to learn to question. I really have been promoting, I had a study abroad class, and I really promote people traveling and learning different perspectives. And I think it's especially good to travel to places where the perspectives is constantly misrepresented in the press that they're reading. Which I really encourage. I did study abroad to Sweden when I was in college. I was really eye-opening, but I think that kind of experience is really good. And I think even more today, and I've worked in different countries. I've traveled to different countries, and there's some truth that you hear, and there's some exaggeration, and sometimes about places in the media. And I think for me, that was able to show me, gee, I really need to question, and I question now everything, because I realize things can be very different than the way they're depicted. And I think, my view of AI is that it's mainstream media, and that mainstream media can really oversimplify things and sometimes leave out too much information.
Great. No, I'm actually taking notes here, because I think there's a lot of value in terms of that, and on the critical thinking, on travel questioning, and then of course the AI being from mainstream media. So I think this is great information. And Dr. Kohn, we would like to thank you for participating today in our podcast. And with this concludes another episode of the Feed Science Podcast presented by Wisenetics. Thank you for joining us today. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on any future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Until next time, this is Carlos Campabadal from the Feed Science Podcast signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.